Yes, and welcome to Vasily's Garden, folks. I'm standing under my umbrella tree. It's a beautiful weeping cherry tree. Now, this is one that I planted 2 or 3 years ago, and when we first planted it, we did cut it back. And I'm going to go through some of the pruning techniques on this to get the weep happening, because too many times I've seen weeping cherry trees where they're really congested, and not just a weeping cherry, could be weeping mulberry. What else do they do in the weeping? They do maples, but they don't need as much of a prune, whereas a weeping cherry does need to be shaped. Now, when you first buy one from your local garden centre, be it a 2-footer or 2 metre one, 2.2 metres or 2.1, you can see the main structural branches because it's got the 2 grafts here on top. That's generally what they do, sort of an east-west or north-south graft. And then from there, it's got a weeping effect occurring. So the weep itself is not from your typical upright cherry tree. It's actually from a ground cover variety that they've discovered a long, long time ago and learned to graft it onto the rootstock of a weeping cherry or an upright cherry, and then from there you get this nice weep happening on it. Now, to establish it properly, you need to do some regular prunes on it, and that's an annual prune on it, so that you can get a nice full canopy on it rather than long spindly branches. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by a long branch. So when you buy your weeping cherry the first time, let's imagine this branch here, if you can see it. This one here is nice and long. It's come down to this point here, which if I don't prune next year, it'll continue to grow and just keep stretching. Now, I've already pruned it once in the past, and I think, or twice. You can see where the prunes were done. There was a prune here. That in the past would have been really long, another foot or 30 or 40 centimetres long. And I've cut it back to here to encourage multiple growth so it can actually sprout out further back, because along each branch, you have what we call buds or nodes that will establish into a branch, leaves or branches and sometimes flowers. But by pruning it back, you're encouraging more growth, and that's what's happened here and here. Now, I'm not sure if you can see the colour contrast. See, that was cut back there, and this is one of the new growths that we got there. Be it all on the underside of the branch. It's not something that we want to occur, so we are going to remove that. So what's the aim with the weeping cherry? And that is to create a nice umbrella shape that weeps outwards away from the centre of the trunk, and it's not too congested. Like your typical upright trees and fruit trees, you don't want any crossing over of branches, no rubbing of branches, and no dead or damaged or diseased wood. And you can see here we've got a lot of branching that's now rubbing. Now, these little spindly side shoots, if we call them that, weren't there last year or before I did the prune. But because of the prune, I've got all this new growth coming out. With each part that weeps out, I like to work around the 40, maybe 50 centimetres in length before I cut it off. And then from there, you get a multiple fork out. It's a touch and go as far as where it'll actually grow, whether it'll grow from the top, because the aim is to cut back to an upward facing bud or an outward facing bud. And that's what I got right there. Now, I can't tell, but this looks like dieback to me, so that's died off. And let me just cut that off to have a closer look. Yep. That's dead wood there. So it was positioned like that, and that's where the bud was, the last bud where it's facing on top, and that would, if it was to sprout, it would have sprouted out and weeped further outwards, facing downwards. Sometimes you'll find buds on the underside that sprout out, and this has died off, and that's what's happened here. In this case here, we've got this one shooting out. This branch here is growing in the wrong direction. The aim is to have this weep and overarching weep from the end of that cut, and it continues on. Now, how long you want to keep this? I said about 40 centimetres. You can make it longer if you like, or even shorter. In this case here, I didn't prune that back, but that's somehow it's died off on its own, and that happens in nature. And we've got these other little side shoots that have come on. But this branch here has to go. So we're going to cut to just below that weep there. And that's cleaned that up for us for now. So that's the first prune I've done on this. The first prune that we should be doing overall is cutting all the branches that are growing from the underside, like this branch here. That there is no good, because you'll always get more shoots coming out over the top eventually. It won't be as dense on top, but the main part of the canopy will be around the outside here. So let's continue pruning off the remaining parts that are facing downwards. See that one there? It's sprouted right in the guts there, right at the beginning. That's no good to us, so remove that as well. We've got multiple branches. That one there is all twisted and turned, so is that. Really no good to us, so we just cut them off. This is on the top. Oh, it's dead already. So we'll just cut that. We might just cut that shorter for now, and we'll come back to it. I know it's getting a bit dark here. It's never bright enough during the winter times, folks. Now look at this over here. We've got a lot going on here. If this was all to grow to the size of my wrist, the branches that is, and they'd probably get to half the size of the wrist, or say the size of the trunk, all this will become so congested and it'll be rubbing. So we need to remove all that stuff in there. No good. And this one's going out to the sky. No good to us as well. And let's have a look here. Underside, undergrowth, go away. That needs to go away. That needs to go away. So I'm literally removing anything that's growing from underneath and in all the wrong direction. Cut that off properly, Vasily. There we are. That one's got to come off as well. This, well, this has got a bit of, it's almost like it's got dieback on it, but it hasn't. But we've got a little weep there. But we don't need so many branches from the middle coming out. And I think this one can come away completely, like that. I am going to end up thinning this out completely, folks, only because I needed to establish more on the outside, on the outskirts. So the skirt has to come out. I know I want it to weep down to here somewhere, neatly. And by the time we get there, we don't want all these little branches starting from the top and multiplying and multiplying. It'll become too dense. You want a nice open sort of weep happening on it, sort of like an umbrella. So when you sit under an umbrella, it's nice and clean and it's open and you know, you're safe from the weather. So with this one here, at the moment, we've got too much going on. All that there is okay, except for this one that's growing underneath there. That's not too bad. This one is growing from under again. See that? No good to us. This is what I was referring to earlier. We cut it back to there, and the last bud there itself actually burst and grew out. Now that's growing out nicely, but it's starting to curl at the end. So we're going to cut it back to an outward facing bud. Just there again. It's a tiny one, quite spindly, but that's okay. We can live with that. That here, we need to fill in this space. But let's go back here. We forgot this one. Look at that. It's growing from underneath. No good to us. I've got the wrong secateurs here, folks. I've got the anvil cutters, the lowies, which are just back in stock as well, folks. These are a fantastic pair of secateurs, the lows, anvil cutters, but you need the pointy ones, a little bypass so you can get in the tight spots. So I grabbed the wrong ones this time. Never mind. Now, all this here, we can just trim it back again to an outward facing bud. As well here, if I could see anymore, I can't see there. That's okay. This is too long. We don't need that long, so we're going to cut it to an outward facing bud as well. We've done that one there. This is growing from underneath again. See, the more you look, the more you find. That's in the wrong spot, and I've got to remove one of these branches. There are too many here. So that there is growing into the guts. It's in the way. It's come from the top. It's okay. We could use this to replace any other damaged one, but in this case, we haven't got anything damaged. That looks quite healthy. Is it? No, it's actually dead. Look at that. If I had the sun shining, that is actually quite dead. So yeah, we're going to take the top off that off completely. And now we're going to be replacing it with either this one or that one. But look at the crossover going on here. We can't afford to have that. So you're going to have less at the top and more coming out from this base here. So we are going to sacrifice this one because we've got this one here already. And that there is technically growing from the underside and too far up to the top. Now we've got another little branch that's coming in here. We may just leave that. It's not really interfering anywhere. We'll just trim it back a little bit, as we will with these ones here. Cut them back. And this down here, it's on the underside again. Look at that. Wrong spot. Yes, we are removing a lot, but to get it right long term, you've got to do a lot of hard pruning in the short term. This is one that is only a few years old. It's only 2 or 3 years old here, folks. On the next episode, I'm going to show you an advanced one that needs a serious prune so that we can shape it again. It hasn't been pruned for a number of years. So now that's on top and it's really far back there and it's competing with this stuff here. So you don't really, you don't need that, but I'm just going to cut it short for now and see in case it wants to perform further out and in case this decides to die back, because that looks like die back as well here. See all that there? If I scratch it, it's dead. That's how you check your branches, folks, if they're alive or not. And they're notorious for dying back like that, but now look where it's died back to this part here, which is the underside. And that's not what we want to do. So that's the wrong cut you're doing, or I've just done there. So we'll cut it back to, actually we'll just cut it back to here, and we'll just trim all these other ones back. Now, we haven't spoken about this little beauty, eh? Have a look at it. It's curled up to the sky. Now you can keep that if you want, if you've got branches like that, and just tie it down on the end carefully and weigh it down or peg it down to the ground. So you cause it to actually weep. So you can do something like that with this. In my case here, I might do that. I haven't got the string with me now, but we're just going to trim the rest of it off. Cut this back. We'll cut this one back a little bit. We'll see if we can fork it out or encourage more growth here. It is spindly, but with a little bit of a prune, you're encouraging it to thicken up a bit. And now another branch here. We don't really need that in there because we've got one coming out there. That's a better one of the two. And that's quite long, so we're just going to trim that back as well to see if we can get something else to grow out of that. Already looking better. We haven't got branches rubbing. This is starting to curl up in the wrong direction. I don't need that curling up. It's crossing over there. So we'll just trim that short and see if something else comes out of there. So if you don't like it completely or it's growing completely in the wrong spot, remove it entirely back to its main point of growth. Otherwise, just cut it a little bit short to 2 or 3 buds, and that way you've got a replacement there in case something else goes wrong on the remaining part. Now that there is growing out in the wrong spot. Yeah, look, I'm just going to cut it back there again and see if I can encourage that to establish a bit better. Almost there, folks. That's spindly, it's getting dark, but we've thinned it out pretty well, I think. Still a couple of little prunes here and there to do just to trim it up. Yeah, that's still young, leave that, let it go. So we almost got an equal level all the way around. We'll just trim this one here as well, just to balance it out. Where's the upward facing bud? Sometimes you know what happens sometimes? You don't get above or below bud, you get a side bud, left and right. And that's okay as well. So we'll just cut it to one of them, and that way we may get it to branch out for us. That's, you know, it's twisted. It's going in the wrong direction. Don't want that going there. So that we'll just, like we said before, we'll cut it back short and we'll enjoy some of the flowers on that. And the last one to get rid of for now is this one here that I've missed completely. So I hope you get the idea there, folks. Thinning it out so you've got a better open vase or open weeping shape. Well, it's an upside down vase in this case. And as I'm looking at it here, it needs to be staked up again. So we're going to trim that up, tie that one down. And any suckers that have grown along there that you haven't removed, you won't see them now, they would have been there earlier in summer, late summer, remove them because it'll keep sprouting up and the energy is taken away from the top and pushed into the rootstock, which this is the rootstock. So weeping cherries, first little episode on a young tree, about 4-year-old, 5-year-old tree we've just pruned. Prune your trees if you haven't, now's the time to do it. And coming up next will be a more advanced one, a little bit shorter but a lot chunkier to work on. Check out our website, folks, for weeping cherry trees, if you like, because we've actually got some online as well, and our pruning sessions, our fruit tree workshops that we're doing with Craig Castry. They're selling pretty fast. There are a few seats left, so take advantage if you want to come down. They're the 13th, 20th and 22nd of July. It's at vasilisgarden.com, and the time this has been uploaded, I think it'll be the second last day, if not the last day of our end of financial year sale. Take advantage before the prices go up. From me, Vasili, Maresi.